Well, the story of how I began this book is actually kind of funny, because it was never supposed to be a book. I was writing something else, and I thought that was going to be my big debut novel. But I was kind of stuck. Some other beta readers, people that I know who had read parts of it,
Hmm.
we couldn't quite figure out why it wasn't working. And I thought, I need to just set this aside for a short time. I'm going to write a short story, just palate cleanser, clear my head. I'm just going to write a little short story,
Yeah.
so that I can come back to this. And my challenge to myself was to fully use tropes that I had never used before in any of my writing. Um, and so I was kind of just Googling, looking at like what are some tropes in fiction and fantasy. And the ones that caught my eye were a magical or mysterious library. And then, oh, what was the other one? Oh, the other one was the Edwardian period, like fantasy versions of the Edwardian period. And I thought, okay, so like that was a decision as thought out as throwing a dart at a map. I was like, okay, there's my prompt. And I started writing, and I wrote my very long short story and shared it with other authors I know. And they very forcefully but politely let me know that I did not have a short story. I had the first third of a novel, and that I needed to finish it because I kind of let it end on a cliffhanger, and they said, no, you've set up a great book and you have to finish it. And so I just kept going with it, and and now it exists.
So if you would like, well, I was going to, can you hold up and wave around a copy of the book? Do you have one in hand?
I don't have a hard copy. It's being printed like right now.
Because you're about 30 days out. It's November. What day is it? November when it actually lands?
November 1st.
Okay, fantastic. Do you have a copy of the blurb you can read out for us? Otherwise, I've got it here in the tab.
Let me just.
It's got such a fun, I don't know, Hogwarts kind of look on the cover.
So here's the funny thing. I've had many people compare it to Harry Potter, and I might alienate people by saying this, but I've never read Harry Potter.
Yeah.
I think I've
read it either. Watched the movie, exactly. I've seen the movies maybe twice through, but that's it.
So the funny thing is because I think it's the flying books is what makes people think of Harry Potter. And the funny thing is that where I got that idea is that I was reading Terry Pratchett at the time, and in his Discworld series, Unseen University has like a magical library, and the books kind of put themselves away. And his is very different. Like there's more in his, and mine is different. But just the idea of books that put themselves away but get themselves in trouble is just really funny to me. So I decided to put my spin on it. Adelina is content to be a humble librarian with no magic, organizing ordinary books and leaving the magical section of the library to the management of the mysterious creature called a cervara, until she finds a misshelved spellbook that refuses to stay in its proper place. Despite warnings from the College of Magic and her superiors, she decides to return the book to the magical section where she meets the mysterious creature. Contrary to what she's been told, the cervara is trying to protect humanity from dangerous magic by hoarding it in the library. But is it also hiding an even greater danger? Leon is a mage in his final year at the college who needs to write something impressive for his final thesis. But when he befriends the charming Adelina and she confides her discovery to him, Leon's world turns upside down. He's forced to try to mediate between the mysterious creature and the power-hungry magi who surround him, all while trying to pursue his favorite librarian. Can Adelina and Leon protect the cervara from the world and the world from the dangers of the library? Or will both sides be destroyed by the secrets they hide and the greed that drives them to seek forbidden knowledge?
Oh, that all sounds amazing. So, oh my goodness, what questions to ask next? What are some? So you mentioned the influences that inspired this. Like, what are some of your favorite books or sources or something that you'd call them comp titles, I guess, but influences that went into this that influenced you?
Yeah, so there are a couple, because as I as I realized this isn't just going to be a short story, I sort of started to think about like what. So before writing that, it's got a lot of humor in it. This book has a lot of humor in it, and I think before working on it, I was trying to be a very serious author who wrote very serious books. And so as I realized, this humorous tone is working. This is going. I can tell this is going to go the distance. So I started to think of like what movies and books did I grow up with that sort of made me get this feeling of like it's humorous and whimsical and all of that. And so the things that came to mind were the movie The Page Master. You guys remember that? Like Macaulay Culkin. And also I grew up watching Miyazaki movies, and I really love how sort of he kind of romanticizes the mundane, and makes just, he can make like anything whimsical. And I really liked the idea of this like whimsical feel even when people are doing like ordinary things. So I'd say those were two. And then also I was reading Terry Pratchett Discworld series, and I think that's where the humor came from. I think that's why it was in the back of my mind. I think those are the main ones.
So, okay, so you've mentioned there's a lot of mystery, there's magic, there's hints at things going potentially very badly wrong, and there's a lot of humor. What's the overall tone or vibe of this? Is it more of the whimsy, or is it like it starts light and it ends in something more serious?
I would say generally, if there are tense moments, they do tend to always wind up being broken up by humor. Simply because I think that's how the characters tend to cope, is whenever things get heavy, they'll turn to humor. But it does also put them in situations. Another thought that I had when I first started it was I loved the idea of a main character whose superpower, maybe everybody else has actual superpowers, but the main character superpower just simply being able to be virtuous when others aren't. And so this idea of Adelina not having magic, but being surrounded by people who do, and sort of being the voice of virtue when things get hard. And also herself just grappling with what are the right things to do and what sort of person do I want to be, now that all these crazy things are happening in my life. So I hope I struck a good balance between deep thought, but then also,
To say more, I mean, that sounds like there might be perhaps even a more personal story there. Like, why does a character like that matter to you?
So, I feel like I'm throwing this out of left field. So I'm a homeschool mom, and I think we have a lot of conversations in my household about virtue, because I think there's a lot of discourse now about, being kind and knowing right from wrong. And I think that while that's fine, I think really the heart of it is virtue, right? And virtues are habits that bring us in line with, the behavior and the will of God. And so, and I think that is way deeper than just being nice, So I think that was on my mind because it was something that I was talking to my kids about a lot, about, in order to figure out what the right thing to do in a situation, you have to figure out what the virtuous thing to do is. Not the easy thing, not the thing that's going to make everybody feel good, but like the virtuous thing. And sometimes that's really hard. Sometimes it means admitting you did something wrong. Sometimes it means saying something to someone that is hard to say. And so it was just in my mind of that there are all these things that we think could save the world, when I really think it's just if people really tried, and we're all going to do it imperfectly, tried to be virtuous at the end of the day, I think that's what's going to really happen.
So when you're sharing this book or this long story with other people, and they're like, you absolutely have to write this. What did you feel at that point? Were you kind of ready to walk away from it, or were you like, thank you for pushing me into writing more? Or what were you feeling at that point?
I didn't expect it. I was kind of surprised. And it was, it was actually, okay, so the two main ones were actually Karina Fabian and Matthew Schmidt, who I don't know if, he's also an author. His books are great. And it was mainly the two of them. I felt like all of a sudden I was in like an intervention, like where they were both like, this is not an ending. This can't be the ending. And just told me, you have to finish this. And I said, well, I don't know what happens next. And so they just started peppering me with questions about like, what if this happened? Or what would happen if this happened? And I think by the time the conversation ended, I really felt like, okay, I can take the next step. I can figure out what happens next, and then what happens after that, and then what happens after. And it's kind of funny because I think most people don't write that. I don't think it often happens that you start with chapter 1 and just write it straight through. And there have been definitely revisions and going back and adding things, but it really did. I wrote it kind of like I was reading it. Like it really was like discovering it as I go.
Okay. Can you say more? Because that's for some authors, that's actually, like you just say, not a lot of authors maybe write that way, or maybe a bunch do and don't admit it or something. Yeah. What is that process? What was that like for you? What were your writing habits like? You said you're a homeschool mom. I imagine your schedule is either highly structured or it's all over the place. So walk us through your experience of writing this.
Mm-hmm. So I think I've spent most of my life lying to myself and telling myself that I'm a person who can write an outline and then stick to it. But all of the things that I've written that I've gotten really good feedback on, that people have said, no, this is really good, are things where I did not have an outline and I didn't know what I was doing, and I just let the characters sort of be whole people and just sort of wander where they wanted, and you wind up deleting a lot, but it's, I think allowing the story to be more character driven and then matching the plot to that works for me a lot better than trying to have a plot and get your characters to follow it. So I finally, another part of the process of writing Misshelved Magic was kind of accepting that I'm not an outline person. I don't have a plan. I just have, I saw something that was so funny. It said, I don't have an outline. I just have vibes. And, and you just start from there. So
what kind of, when you're getting into the zone with writing, what do you like to do to get into the mood? Or do you just like grab time whenever you can get it and you're just thinking about it in other times? Or do you have, I don't know, interest boards and specific music you play or little things that you get up to get focused? What's that like for you?
So it's kind of both, because again, as a homeschool mom, sometimes it's, oh, the kids are playing and leaving me alone. I better open up my laptop and write down the thought I had earlier. And other times it's a more intentional, my husband's great, and I can tell him, you got to put the kids to bed because I would really love some writing time, and he'll handle all that so that I can have a chunk of time. I can't do music with words if I'm trying to write words, but I do like, instrumental kind of movie soundtracks are great because they tend to be very dramatic.
Mm-hmm. What soundtracks were you listening to, like on repeat? Like, what were your top favorites?
So here's the horrible thing. It was a soundtrack for a video game that my husband plays, and I don't know what it is, and I've never played it. But the soundtrack was great. If I remember it, I'll tell you, but I've never played it.
Okay. I'm like that too. Like I'll be in love with movies or games long before I've ever seen them, just because I've binged the soundtracks over and over. Yeah. How long did it take you to write?
I started it in March of 2022.
Okay. Wow.
And then I think.
And is that, you started it after writing the first third of the...
No, that's when I was like, oh, I'll write a short story. But I'd say it took maybe 14 to 15 months, which is really fast, because again, it was like I was reading a book. Like it was like, what happens next? And yeah.
Wow. And then you went on to be published by Chrism. So I want to ask you about that experience in a second. But first, have you always been a writer?
Yes. I have things from when I was in kindergarten that are just little scribbled out stories. And I always wrote. And I know in school, in middle school and high school, I did short story competitions and poetry competitions. And so I was always writing. Obviously, I read it now and it's terrible, but I was always in the habit of writing. I always had the desire to write. And it wasn't until I found and joined the Catholic Writers Guild that I started to meet people who are very good at giving feedback. And I think that's one of the pieces of advice that I give, like, anybody who wants to take their writing seriously, is learn how to take criticism from the right people. Because if your work is too precious for criticism, then it can get better. So I think I made the decision early on, this is not about hurting my feelings. This is about, I need to listen and understand this feedback and kind of treat it like a class, like learn and try something different. And why didn't that work? And it was through doing critiquing and beta reading with others in the Catholic Writers Guild that I think I really found my process and my voice.
That's awesome. Speaking of your voice, what is, I have a suspicion that every writer has something in their writing that just comes really easily to them, and then they have to work really hard on other stuff. And maybe an early mentor or somebody else who read your work goes, hey, that part or aspect of this was amazing. And of course, you double down on that in early years. And in later years, it of course serves you very easily, serves you very well. What would your superpowers be, or what comes like really naturally to you? And then where do you feel you have to work harder?
I think I'm really good with like out of the box thinking, of just coming up with, I'll tell someone a premise I thought of and they're like, I'd never heard of that. But then when it comes to the discipline, the grammar and the part where there's rules, it's the part that I've had to work harder at, and all the other rules, show, don't tell, and don't give people a wall of information for pages, and things like that are the things that I think really developed once I was in conversation with some other authors.
Coolest thing you learned in the last 2 years while working on this book? What would you say?
Well, so there is, my faith comes into everything I write, not in, I never consider myself to be like a preacher or a teacher, but that's how I look at the world. And so it did lead to some very interesting, like, theological conversation with people around me, saying like, I'm kind of thinking through this thing because I'm trying to think of how this would show up, like, in my book. Because the hard part with, I think, with fiction is that even if you're not trying to write a metaphor, someone might take it as a metaphor. And I was very intentionally, I didn't want to accidentally say something untrue in metaphor that I didn't mean to say. And so I think there were certain things where I would say, this would be a cool story, but I think somebody might take it metaphorically in this other way, which is not, what I mean. So it didn't just bring up a lot of, I have a friend who was in seminary at the time and he's now a priest, and I would just send him the most random, like on a Tuesday at 3 p.m. and just ask him just some crazy question about heaven. So yeah.
What was the experience like getting published through Chrism?
It was they're great people, and it was I learned a lot from that as well. And this is going to sound crazy. It was kind of fun. Like, it was kind of fun to have, because by that point I had developed the ability to sort of take criticism without taking it personally and taking it as we're making it better. This isn't just somebody, lobbing criticism at me to be mean. And so getting to work with editors who, they believe in the book just like I do, and they want to make it the best it can be. And because there's like a humorous tone in the book of just kind of spitballing like funny things that could happen, and just like little things. I'm trying to think like what I'm allowed to. The books. I think it's the books put themselves away because they're magic and they put themselves away. And the problem is that Adelina finds one that's not where it belongs and won't stay where it belongs. And I remember a conversation with one of my editors where she said, what if someone just didn't let go of the book? Like, would it like carry them off? And so we started talking about like what kind of hijinks like flying books could cause. And some of them do show up in the book. So it was just very, very fun to work with people who believed in the book as much as I did and wanted to make it better.
Yeah.
But brought a fresh perspective to it.
Oh, why did you end up choosing Chrism compared? Like, who else were you evaluating?
Yeah, so I went to the Catholic Writers Conference in 2020, or no, I'm sorry, 2023. My timeline might be off. I think it was 2023. And they have what's called pitch sessions where Catholic publishers will sit and hear pitches from authors. And I signed up to pitch to every single one that accepted fiction, because a lot of them were nonfiction only. And I signed up to pitch to every single one that took fiction and had a lot of great feedback, a lot of great conversations, and then heard back from Chrism. So, and got great feedback from other ones that I pitched to. But by then I said I've got an offer from Chrism already. So that's.
Why did you choose, or what was it that prompted you to go the traditional publishing route instead of, say, self-publishing or something?
Yeah, I have a huge amount of respect for people who self-publish because you really are running a small business. You know, all the making a cover, the formatting, figuring out how to list it for sale and how to market it, and all of that is just on the author. And I always thought to myself, those are skills that I can learn, but I know that I learn better from watching others, and from like kind of through dialogue with others rather than just being by myself with a laptop figuring something out. And so those were skills I just thought that I could learn better, not trying to figure it out all on my own by myself. And I have so much respect, and sometimes I envy people that can do that. They can just go
Incredible
and go for it, right? And that's awesome. But I didn't. That wasn't my first plan of attack.
No. So as of this recording, we're just under a month out from your book actually landing. For those who visit your website, what is it that they can look forward to from you, and maybe joining your mailing list or following you on social? What are you looking forward to getting up to, sharing with people, or, what are your plans?
Yeah, well, so obviously, Misshelved Magic, and I am working on another book in the same series, and it's a complete draft, but it's still got some work, which I think is fine given that Misshelved Magic doesn't even come out for another month, but I am working on that, so there are more books. And I do have a mailing list. I try to put up book reviews and interviews with other authors I know about their books, and also just book recommendations, because I like a lot of different genres. I predominantly write fantasy, but I like to read a lot of different genres, and so I like to help people find books in genres that might not be the first one you are recommended if you're looking in that genre. So yeah, and then I am on social media. I do, again, have just a goofball sense of humor, so I do sometimes post very silly videos on Instagram of just goofy things. I just posted one that was all the crazy bookmarks I found in my children's books this week. I found like empty snack wrappers and a magnetile and just all the random things they're using for bookmarks around the house. So just silly things like that.
Yeah, that's cool. Last question on our way out. If I'll ask the question in a second. Friends, if you did enjoy this conversation, check the links below this video. There's a link for Sarah's website. You can pre-order, I imagine, a copy of the book, and you can get on the mailing list and follow her. So please do that. You'll also see a second link. We are counting down to our annual online convention called Legend Haven. And Sarah will also be there with Karina and a couple of others. They're talking about No Tame Lions is the name of the panel. And it's about, do you have a few words you want to share on that topic? Why
I do. I think that for a lot of people, when they think of Christian fiction, they think of the Amish books, and that's fine if somebody likes that, right? Or like they think of like Hallmark, right? And I feel like it's like you either really love Hallmark movies or really hate them. And I'm more on the side of like, they don't do it for me, And so I think that Christian fiction doesn't need to be safe. And I think that, again, when we think about metaphor and we're careful with our metaphors and we really think through it, characters can do horrible things and we can still have great stories that display virtue in using characters and using situations that we've all ended up in situations, and we've all done things that aren't virtuous and aren't the best, and that's where you grow. And so I think that those messy kind of stories, I'd like to see more of them.
Yeah, that's exactly our ethos with Legend Fiction, which is the writing community behind this con. So yeah, check out the Catholic Writers Guild, and then have a look at legendfiction.com. We do have a totally free plan for anybody to come in and hang out and just get writing done together. So last thought for you, Sarah. What's been something, since you've been working on this book and sharing it, what's been a comment or a piece of feedback that somebody has given you that would make you annoyed if you let it? And what do you think about it?
I do think the first time someone compared it to Harry Potter, I was kind of taken aback because I was like, I've never even read Harry Potter. Like, how could my book be like Harry Potter? But then the more I thought about it, that was my like initial reaction. And then I thought about it, I was like, those books are really popular. I mean, like if someone's going to compare my book to something, there are worse options. And I think everybody likes to think that their book is unique and groundbreaking and there's nothing like it. But at the end of the day, people are going to compare your work to other work. And I think I've learned to see that as a good thing instead of like a threat to my uniqueness. So I think now it doesn't bother me. It's interesting to see the connections other people make of you connected my book to a book I've never read. That's really interesting.
That is cool. And you didn't have any feedback of somebody who was like, oh, Catholics can't write about magic or something? Did you really get that?
Not from other authors and not from... I've gotten that feedback, and it was generally from somebody who probably doesn't read fantasy anyway and probably doesn't understand. And I think, there are people who really like fantasy and imagination, and they can kind of see the difference between, fantasy is not real, but that's okay. It's, it's not necessarily bad that it's not real. And then I think there are people who are way more literal and they want like to read World War II history because it actually happened. So I have gotten the comment that it can't be Christian if it has magic in the title, but generally those comments come from people who I don't think read fantasy anyway, and that's fine if they, my book's not for them, and that's fine.